All right, let's start. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. And thank you for those who will be listening a little bit later on the replay. My name is Tammy Heber. I'm a certified residential real estate appraiser, and we are going to talk a little bit about some things that agents face, and then we're going to answer some questions that were already submitted to us. So let's talk about comparable sales first. What makes a comparable work? What makes it appropriate to use when you're pricing your listing? Same style, of course. Someone who was looking for one floor living, for example, they're not going to be interested in a colonial. They're going to stick with ranches or something that's easily accessible. So when you're comping, make sure that you're using the same style as your subject. Similar in size, same thing. If someone is looking perhaps to downsize, they're looking for a 1,200 square foot ranch, they're not going to be interested in a 3,000 square foot, even if it's a ranch, even if it's still on the one level like they would like. They're not going to be interested in something like that. So make sure that you're speaking to the same market participants, listing your subject property to the comparable sales that you are using. Condition, same thing. If your subject property is cosmetically dated, or consequently, if it has been renovated, you're going to want to compare that to other homes that are similar in condition. You're not going to want to compare a house that was recently renovated if your subject hasn't been updated since the 1960s. So again, we're trying to compare apples with apples. And location also very important. If your subject property, say, is on a main road, you are not going to want to compare that to a home on a quiet cul-de-sac. You are going to want other homes that are exposed to the same amount of traffic or maybe noise or whatever else maybe similar to your subject property. So make sure that you are comparing apples with apples, not apples with kumquats. They should be the same. They should appeal to the same market. And the buyer should say, well, here's the subject property. Here's the comparable sale. They're so very similar. I don't know which one I would choose. In a perfect world, that is a great comparable sale. Just because the sale is higher and it sells for more does not make it a usable comp. So for example, if you're comping out your subject property, the property you're about to list, and you have, say, so far, 4 sale prices in there, 290, 325, 300, they're all in that same general vicinity. You are not going to want to pull a comparable for 525,000 because it just doesn't make sense. If you've got comparables that are already in the $300,000 range, something in the $500,000 range is not going to make any sense. So just make sure that you're researching them, you're looking at them. Why did that sell for more? And chances are it's simply an outlier. And for whatever reason, sold for higher than everything else in the neighborhood, it should be just disregarded. Biggest comp mistakes. Choosing comparables to support the list price or sale price as opposed to letting the market dictate what is appropriate. Never start with a contract price when you're searching for comparable sales. Never start with what the seller thinks that the home is worth, unless you're trying to prove that perhaps that manner of thinking is not appropriate and you can show someone what houses in their square footage, etc., is really selling for. So I would never suggest starting with a contract price, working backwards, trying to support that with the comparables. Never also mix property types. So if you say, for example, you are selling a detached condominium and you run across a single family home that's the same condition, same type of location, same square footage, etc., and you decide that you're going to use the single family home to price the condo, why would you not want to do that? Well, the biggest reason is because the single family home sold with the land beneath the dwelling, whereas a condo, you don't have the value of the land to consider when you're pricing. So just make sure, for many different reasons, you are not mixing property types when you are listing, because those two properties are not comparable. And again, ignoring condition differences. Never ever use an updated home to compare to something that has not been updated. I will tell you from almost 40 years experience as an appraiser, it is much better to use appropriate comparable sales as opposed to determining an adjustment. Start with a good foundation and work out, as opposed to starting with something that you're going to have to adjust for. Adjustments. We'll talk about that a little bit. What actually matters. They should reflect what the buyer wants, what the market is saying to you. And not everything will get a dollar adjustment. You're basing it on market reaction. Let's think about things like in-ground pools in New England, where if you actually don't get to use a pool, say for the amount of time that you would if the house was in Arizona or Florida. So when you do your market research, you may end up determining in-ground pools, I'm just using that for an example, in-ground pools actually don't have any contributory value to your listing. Or maybe it's an over improvement. Maybe they have indoor tennis courts or indoor basketball courts or that kind of thing. Maybe that amenity does not add value. Maybe it will make it more marketable, but doesn't necessarily add value. So not every upgrade will get value. And cost does not equal value. So if your client is saying to you, I spent $150,000 on this pool or this detached garage or this kitchen renovation, it's not going to add $150,000 worth of value typically. You're going to, again, let the market speak to you and tell you what it is adding for additional value. I know a lot of agents use price per square foot. It can be a valuable tool, but it is only one tool. Price per square foot is difficult to comp like on a single family home because what does price per square foot consider? It considers the land, the improvements, the size of the house, the condition, all in one, as opposed to what an appraiser would do, which is break out all of those things and value them separately. So be very careful. Usually smaller homes have a larger price per square foot than a large home. So be careful when you're using that because it's definitely not an appropriate method. If you're using it for, say, a condominium, then it might be a viable source to help you with a listing price. But generally speaking, it's not particularly reliable. So you can use it as a check, but not as a primary pricing strategy. Meeting the appraiser, what helps an appraisal go smoothly? I will tell you, providing comparable sales is great. It's very helpful for the appraiser to know what you priced your listing on. However, it is also just as important that you, as the agent, learn what a comparable sale is. Learn what the Fannie Mae guidelines say. Learn what the appraiser has to go by for their guidelines. You can find all those things online. The guideline number is 4000.1, and that's an FHA guideline. And you can look at them and see, or you can visit us at realestatetraininghub.com. I also have a checklist and a bunch of other training material that you can learn this type of information. Helping the appraiser access all areas of the house is extremely important, mainly because it is often a lender overlay, meaning it's an additional lender guideline that the appraiser have access to all these places and take interior photos. So say there's a garage on the property, but it's locked. Make sure the appraiser can get in, because if they can't, and this is a requirement for the lender, they're going to send the appraiser back, and then a trip fee is going to be charged. So just make sure that they have access to begin with. Make sure utilities are on, because we're required to check if the weather is permitting. We're required to check that the heat is functional, etc. And share upgrades. I think that's a great thing to do. If you can make a list of all the upgrades, don't expect the appraiser to walk into a property and automatically know what has been done. The appraisal form actually asks the appraiser, has the kitchen been updated? Has the bath been updated? And if so, when? So if you can share that information with the appraiser when they have their site visit, that is extremely helpful. And don't sell the house to the appraiser. Use the information, that's very, very helpful, but don't sell it to us over and over. Appraisers deal in facts, and that's really, really important to remember. If we don't have the data to support an adjustment or a sale price, that's where things can go off the rails. Appraisers only use data. It's an opinion based on fact. So if the appraiser can't see it, they can't consider it. Or if they don't know about it, they can't consider it. Why two appraisers might not agree. This happens all the time. We can use different comparable sales. There may be a range. Maybe the adjusted range on the appraisal was from 400,000 to 475. That happens. That absolutely happens. Maybe one appraiser reconciled their appraisal toward the lower end of the range, and maybe the appraiser on the other side reconciled to a higher end. The bottom line is the appraiser has to feel comfortable with what they appraise the value for. They are, in essence, in every report, taking their license, putting it on top of their appraisal and saying, I bet my license that this is what this is worth. So That's the reason that two appraisers might not agree, and that's fine. It's an opinion of value based on the facts that they know or that they are willing to support. If you want to go deeper into training, you can go to realestatetraininghub.com. I have a ton of free resources similar to this, plus checklists and guidelines, etc., that you could be helpful. Or feel free to email me at tammy@ctappraiser.com to get you started. We have paid resources, we have full resources. I think you'll find plenty of things that will help you along on in your career and in your practice. I do have some other questions here. I think it's probably easier for me to just answer these as opposed to opening it up to let everyone ask their questions. Let's see. Why don't you use the highest comparable sales? Well, because as I said, they have to make sense. They have to gel with the rest of the comparables that we use so that there is a range of values that look like they're reasonable. How far back can comps go? Well, that's a great question. You can go back as far as you need to, as long as you are supporting the market and as long as you're considering any increase or decrease in value since that sale occurred. So, for example, say you're pricing something that's a little bit not as common, say a log home or a barn dominium or something like that. And the most recent sale you had was 3 years ago. You can absolutely use that sale in order to price your listing. Just consider what the market has done in those 3 years. So if you need to make a time adjustment, you can certainly do that. So don't hesitate to use older comparables. My apologies, that is my dog, or at least one of them. Gabriel, let's see. Appraisal issue here. Why did the appraisal come in low? Well, as I said, the appraiser is dealing with data. And especially if you're dealing with multiple offer situations, you're dealing with an emotional thing. You are dealing with somebody who say they've been looking for their house for the past 3 years, they can't find anything, and at this point in time, they're just willing to bid it up to wherever it needs to go so they can get the house. Well, that is an emotional response, but that is opposite of what the appraiser needs to do. The appraiser, again, will deal only in data. So if the data isn't there to support that sale price where you had multiple offers, etc., then those multiple offers will not matter. And that is exactly why an appraisal may come in below a contract price. Let's see. How do you determine adjustments? That is a very, very big question. I do cover that. I have several trainings on this inside the Real Estate Training Hub that you are welcome to take a look at. I just posted a video about how to do paired sales analysis, which is one method of adjustments. Because again, if no two houses generally are going to be absolutely identical, and say one has an extra half bath, one has an extra full bath, one has a larger garage, whatever the case may be, you have to adjust for those differences. There are many methods for adjustments, but if you want to go and take a look at the website, we'll show you a few of them. FHA, that's a great question. FHA has a very specific set of guidelines in that they are trying to protect the lender's collateral, the money that they lent so someone could buy this house, but also to make the house safe and sound for the inhabitants. So there is an entire list of things that the appraiser is looking out for when they do their site visit. If you would like that checklist, feel free to email me at tammy@ctappraiser.com. I will be happy to send you that FHA checklist. But yes, there is a list of things like peeling paint if the house was built prior to 1978 because of the concern for lead-based paint, that kind of thing. So yes, there are a list of things that need to be complied with. This should not scare anyone away from accepting FHA financing. However, FHA financing doesn't require anything unreasonable. It's simply hoping that the inhabitants are safe in the property. So don't stop accepting an FHA offer because of that. However, if you know the house is in bad shape and the seller doesn't have the finances to repair anything. So for example, the roof is bad and there's been, say, water damage, or the heat doesn't work, the furnace is non-functional, don't accept FHA financing for that type of house, because if they can't make those repairs, FHA is not going to lend money on a house that's not going to comply with their guidelines. So that is just something for an agent to consider. Let's see, what else do we have here? Do solar panels add value? That's always a good question. Solar panels do add value in the sense that there is a value in use. However, these are very, very market specific. I know in the market that I personally work in, buyers do not value solar. And based on what I have seen, they are not willing to pay more for that amenity. There is a way to figure out what the contributory value for the value in use would be. You can, I think it's PV solar that shows how to value it based on the size of the panels, et cetera. So that's something you can use. However, pay close attention to your market to see whether your market is actually willing to pay more for solar than other areas. Let's see, what else? Can I use active listing? This will be a last question. Active listings, when you price your listing, you really need to use closed sales. Again, the appraiser is going to use market data. That doesn't mean you don't pay attention to active listings, because active listings will show you where the market is headed. Closed sales show where the market has been. Active listings, pending sales, that kind of thing, show where the market is headed. So, for example, if you will use your 1,200 square foot ranch again, if your closed comps are showing a sale price of $350,000, for example. However, you notice that there are 5 listings on the market that are showing $25,000 less for the list price. Is the market changing? This is a question that you have to ask yourself. Is the market starting to reverse, or is that particular style of house no longer in favor? So active listings, pending listings, that kind of thing, even expired listings will give you some very, very important market data that you should be looking at, as well as closed sales, because it can really help you price your listings. I think that's just about it for today. It's about all we have time for. Feel free to visit us at realestatetraininghub.com. We have some free resources in there. We have some paid courses if you want to go deeper. It's a very, very valuable resource for you. Or email me at Tammy, that's TAMMY, at ctappraiser.com if you have any other questions. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was wonderful to talk with you all, and hopefully I will see you all again soon.